What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. Dean Ambrose, now known as Jon Moxley, made his WWE debut at Survivor Series in 2012 alongside Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins as The Shield. The Shield would dominate for over a year until Seth Rollins had broke up the group by hitting Roman Reigns with the steel chair, and ultimately Dean Ambrose with one too. Once Ambrose went off to singles competition, he would have high-profile feuds with the likes of Seth Rollins, Bray Wyatt, and even having a WrestleMania match with Brock Lesnar, which a lot of people, including Ambrose himself, wouldn't like to talk about today. He would go on to become Mr. Money in the Bank and become the WWE Champion in 2016 before dropping the title to AJ Styles. He would win multiple Intercontinental Championships, Tag Team Championships, before ultimately leaving the WWE in 2019, where his final match was with The Shield once again. In May of 2019, Ambrose, now known as Jon Moxley, would debut for All Elite Wrestling at their Double or Nothing event. And then Moxley would go on to have 3 AEW World Championship reigns, which is the most reigns as I'm recording this video, and would also win the AEW International Championship amongst many other accomplishments within the company. And although it seems like Moxley is having a great time working for All Elite Wrestling, today's episode is basically kind of what I talked about a couple of weeks ago involving Cody Rhodes and had he not left AEW, but this is kind of the equivalent as terms to what would happen if someone didn't leave WWE. So today we cover the topic of what if Dean Ambrose didn't leave WWE in 2019. So how I'm going to be doing this episode is basically the same way I did the Cody Rhodes episode of talking about pay-per-view by pay-per-view of what the superstar would be doing, and we would be doing this for an entire year's worth of matches that Ambrose would do, considering that I feel like even though he was very disgruntled with creative, that maybe he would think, I'll sign one more contract for one full year and see how I feel about wanting to re-sign another multi-year deal with WWE. So starting off with Money in the Bank 2019, he would be a part of the Money in the Bank ladder match. Of course, you're trying to make sure that Ambrose doesn't officially leave WWE, so starting off with basically a high-profile match like the Money in the Bank ladder match is a good start in my opinion. And I should mention at this point also that the draft had happened and he'd been switched from Monday Night Raw, which he was originally on, and getting drafted to Friday Night SmackDown in 2019. And unfortunately for this match, he doesn't win because this is the year that all of a sudden Brock Lesnar decides to join the match later on and wins the Money in the Bank briefcase. Then for Super Showdown in 2019, he would challenge Kofi Kingston for the WWE Championship. Once again, I feel like at this point, Ambrose was a high-profile superstar on Monday Night Raw, so coming to Friday Night SmackDown would be a huge deal, and I think automatically he should be someone that should go after that WWE Championship and would be a good set of matches with Kofi Kingston. And I should mention also at Stomping Grounds 2019, he also challenges Kofi Kingston for the WWE Championship. Basically, what Dean Ambrose is doing is exactly what Dolph Ziggler had ended up doing in the real timeline in having those two matches with Kofi Kingston for the WWE Championship, in which unfortunately in both of those matches, Dean Ambrose would lose those matches, but I would imagine at Stomping Grounds for the match with Kofi Kingston that they would bring back the stipulation of the Ambrose Asylum match, since it goes along with the whole Dean Ambrose gimmick. Then I guess moving forward to SummerSlam 2019, he would actually face off against Roman Reigns. Now this match actually wouldn't have affected the real timeline, considering Roman Reigns actually didn't compete at SummerSlam, and so I think it would be very intriguing to put Dean Ambrose in such a high-profile feud, especially with what would have been the face of the company, Roman Reigns. Now, of course, we've seen multiple times of Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins in a feud, and we have seen Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns in a feud a bunch of times, but we've never actually really seen a Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns feud, so I think that would have been very intriguing and would have been a great feud to lead SmackDown. And for this match, I actually would have Dean Ambrose defeat Roman Reigns. Obviously, it'd be due to shenanigans, but I think it'd be a huge win at a Big Four pay-per-view event. Then going to the Clash of Champions 2019 event, he once again would have a match with Roman Reigns, but this time Roman Reigns does pick up the victory. Of course, if you want to continue the feud, you're gonna have to at least tie the series up 1-1 between Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns, and I mean, with Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns being great friends in real life, they would definitely be cooking up some great stuff as terms to a nice storyline, especially during a time like 2019 where some storylines for the most part were kind of lackluster. And then we move on to October of that year at Hell in a Cell 2019. We officially see Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns one last time, and I would imagine that this match would be big enough to be inside of Hell in a Cell. And I can't exactly remember who else had Hell in a Cell as their stipulation besides that atrocious Fiend Bray Wyatt versus Seth Rollins match where the entire arena was basically red and that you could barely see the match. So I think even in that case, I would have wished that they replaced that Hell in a Cell match with Dean Ambrose versus Roman Reigns, because I think they would have been cooking inside there. In which I would actually have Dean Ambrose defeat Roman Reigns in this match, especially because Dean Ambrose coming off a loss from Money in the Bank and losing his feud for the WWE Championship to Kofi Kingston, you gotta start building up some of these top heels on SmackDown, and I think Dean Ambrose would have excelled very well as a top heel on SmackDown rather than trying to be a top heel on a flagship show like Monday Night Raw. And I honestly don't think it would have hurt Roman Reigns at all at this point. Then for Crown Jewel 2019 in Saudi Arabia, Dean Ambrose would participate in the Team Hogan versus Team Flair match. It's been a while since I've seen this, so I don't know if it was a mix of different superstars or maybe Team Hogan was basically the team full of baby faces and Team Flair was the team full of heels. But whatever the match result was, which I believe it was Team Hogan defeating Team Flair, still stays the same as terms to this match. On the road to Survivor Series in 2019, Dean Ambrose would capture the WWE Intercontinental Championship. And at this point, that would mean he would join the North American Champion Roderick Strong from NXT and the United States Champion AJ Styles from Raw in the triple threat match at Survivor Series, replacing Shinsuke Nakamura. I think this still would have been a decent match even if it didn't have Shinsuke Nakamura, and I believe this was the Survivor Series that, even though NXT was a part of it, I think pretty much NXT won every single match as terms to this. So I think Roderick Strong was winning, but it doesn't matter who wins because this match was still pretty decent. Now at TLC 2019, Dean Ambrose would be facing Bray Wyatt in a one-on-one match. Now in the real timeline, it was The Miz who had faced Bray Wyatt under the Firefly Funhouse persona in a normal one-on-one match, but because we have Dean Ambrose in this case, I think that it's just truly fitting for his gimmick that he goes one-on-one with the Fiend iteration of Bray Wyatt. And I would assume that there's gotta be some sort of stipulation, whether it is a TLC or even like a tables match, because I believe there wasn't a tables match throughout this entire specific show of TLC in 2019. And I think this match would be epic with what both competitors could do, and it could be advertised as more of a champion versus champion match because in this case, of course, Dean Ambrose is still the Intercontinental Champion, but if you remember, the Fiend that was originally on Monday Night Raw got drafted to SmackDown with the Universal Championship. So the Universal title is now the official World Championship of Friday Night SmackDown, and neither titles would be on the line in this case, just like the title wasn't on the line in the match that Bray Wyatt had with The Miz. And I think this definitely makes sense since a lot of the Fiend's feuds were based off of feuds with competitors Bray Wyatt had previously, which Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose had previously feuded back in like 2014, 2015. And of course in this match, the Fiend Bray Wyatt does go over. The gimmick was super uber popular. There's just no way that Dean Ambrose was winning, but they could have had an excellent match. Like maybe the match that Dean Ambrose was hoping to have with Brock Lesnar back at WrestleMania 32, but he would have been able to with a guy like Bray Wyatt. Now at the Royal Rumble in 2020, I think most likely he would have competed in the Royal Rumble match that year. I just don't think at that point that they would have had just a separate match for the Intercontinental Championship on this show. So I think that he would have just been put right into the Royal Rumble match. And obviously this is the Royal Rumble where Drew McIntyre wins and would go on to win the title at WrestleMania in front of no fans because 2020 is the year of the pandemic. Now, the next pay-per-view was Elimination Chamber, the last one before the pandemic happened, in which he would defend the Intercontinental Championship against Daniel Bryan. Now, of course, we would see in AEW now how well Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson, respectively, would be able to work together. So I think having a match at this time between each other would have been really cool, having a heel Dean Ambrose and, of course, an uber babyface Daniel Bryan. And I think at this point, Dean Ambrose would retain the championship, but it would be due to shenanigans because WrestleMania 36 would be a rematch between Daniel Bryan and Dean Ambrose. Now, I'm sure at this point, I feel like there's got to be a stipulation added to it. I don't know if it would be some sort of like street fight because Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins ended up having that kind of match. Maybe they have some sort of match like, let's say, an Iron Man match to kind of like test out their wrestling skills. I don't exactly know, but what I am going to say here is that at this particular point, Daniel Bryan would win and become the brand new WWE Intercontinental Champion. Now, this would officially mean that the new one-year contract for Dean Ambrose would be over. This is where I think you guys would sound off on the comment section below and letting me know what happens with Dean Ambrose next. Would he have been satisfied to sign another contract with WWE with this new run, or does he officially leave at this point and go to AEW during the pandemic? That's going to be the end of this week's episode of Pro Wrestling What If. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this to all your friends and press the notification bell to be notified of when future episodes release. Leave a comment in the comment section below and let me think what you would have thought happened with Dean Ambrose had he not left WWE in 2019. And I hope to see you guys next week on a brand new edition of Pro Wrestling What If.